911, what's your emergency?
Yes, I need Decatur County 911.
This is him. What's wrong, dear?
Listen, 681 Swan Johnson Road. Somebody has my daughter. Somebody in full camouflage got Holly. Grabbed her and took her to the woods. Please, get everybody out there.
This is the frantic voice of Holly Bobo's mother, minutes after she disappeared from her home. She was last seen alive by her brother walking into the woods outside her home with a man wearing camouflage.
I left where I was standing and I walked over to the back door, and that's when I saw a male and a female walking towards the woods, and I recognized the female as my sister, and at this time still thought the male was Drew.
Years later, her partial remains would be found in northern Decatur County with a bullet wound to the back of the head.
Say to the Bobo that I'm sorry for the loss. That all got shattered because of these men.
But what really happened to Holly? Who was the man in camouflage? Did the police arrest the real killers? Or did they make a terrible mistake? Let's explore. Holly Bobo was a 20-year-old nursing student at the University of Tennessee. She lived in Decatur County with her parents, Karen and Dana Bobo, and her older brother, Clint, who was 25 years old. She was also the cousin of the country singer, Whitney Duncan.
She's beautiful, kind of shy, quiet girl until you get to know her. And then she's just funny and sweet, and she's amazing.
Those who knew Holly described her as shy and sweet. She was raised in a Christian household and was extremely close with her mother, Karen, who was a teacher at a local elementary school. Holly also had a long-term boyfriend named Drew Scott, and the two were planning a future together, with Drew even giving her a promise ring. Sadly, this future would be cruelly cut short on the fateful morning of April 13th, 2011. Holly was preparing for an 8 a.m. exam, so she got up pretty early at 4:30 a.m. Her mom, Karen, had packed a lunch for her before heading to work.
She was sitting at the kitchen table studying, and I kissed her goodbye and told her I loved her, just like every other morning.
Her boyfriend Drew called her at 7:30 a.m. to tell her that he was turkey hunting nearby at her grandma's property. After a brief conversation, Holly gathered her stuff and made her way to her Mustang in the attached garage, ready to head to school. At 7:40 a.m., one of her neighbors heard a loud scream coming from the Bobo's home. He immediately informed his mother, who then called Karen and told her what was happening. Meanwhile, Holly's brother, Clint, was woken up by the barking of the family dogs. When he went to investigate, he saw his sister outside with a man dressed in camouflage. At first, Clint thought the man was Holly's boyfriend, Drew. It appeared to be Holly kneeling down and Drew. They looked like they were kneeled down facing each other in the garage, and they were talking back and forth. Holly sounded very upset and heated. He was doing much of the talking, and she would answer back and things like that. I couldn't make out hardly any of the words. The only words I could make out from here were Holly saying, "No, why?" Clint said that he believed the couple was breaking up and didn't want to get involved, so he tried calling his mom instead to check if Holly didn't have school. When Karen didn't answer, he left her a text message hoping that she would call back. Meanwhile, Karen had already received the call from the neighbor. In a panic, she called Clint and told him that the man was not Drew.
I don't know what made me say it. This instant panic came over me, and I said, "That's not Drew. Call all the neighbors," I think is what I said. And then I ran over to the office and I called 911. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I remember they said that was Henderson County. We live in Decatur County, so I hung up. I think I fell on the floor at that point. I guess I called Clint back, but I don't really remember now if it was from the library phone or the office phone, and he was still talking about, was Holly not going to school today? Was she turkey hunting with Drew? And I said, "That's not Drew," and at some point I said, "Get a gun and shoot him."
Clint was confused and asked his mom if she wanted him to shoot Drew, but Karen hung up to call 911. Clint then looked outside again and saw Holly and the man walking towards the nearby woods.
I left where I was standing and I walked over to the back door, and that's when I saw a male and a female walking towards the woods, and I recognized the female as my sister, and at this time still thought the male was Drew.
But then he noted that the guy was bigger than Drew, and this is where the story gets weird. Instead of grabbing the gun like his mother had asked him and chasing after the guy who was clearly abducting his sister, Clint tried calling his sister's cell phone, as well as Drew's, but neither of them answered. When his mother called again, Clint was still in the house and told her what he had witnessed. His mother was the one who actually told him to call 911. Clint then took a loaded pistol and went outside, where he found a puddle of red near Holly's car. That's when he dialed 911. Authorities arrived at the scene at around 8:10 a.m. and the investigation began. Clint described the man who took Holly as being between 5'10" and 6 feet, weighing 180 to 200 pounds and having dark hair sticking out from under his cap that was long enough to cover his neck and touch his collar. He said the man was wearing a hat and camouflage clothes from head to toe, and his voice was deep and low. This description confirmed that Holly's boyfriend Drew was not the one who had taken her. Investigators also confirmed that the red stains found in the garage belonged to Holly. This confirmed that there was a struggle and Holly was taken away unwillingly. Cell phone pings showed Holly's phone moving away from her home and heading north toward a wooded area near Interstate 40, before stopping around 8:30 to 9 a.m. for about 30 minutes. It began moving again, heading south in a completely different route. The last cell phone ping was in the woods, where her phone was later found with the SIM card removed. Holly's parents arrived home to find their home swamped by law enforcement agents, including the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, the FBI, SWAT, and U.S. Marshals. But despite being so many of them, they seemed uncoordinated, with many just standing around, unsure of what they were supposed to be doing. They had not started a search party or even spoken to the neighbors. The area had also not been cornered off as a crime scene, and people were just around at will. This includes the garage where Holly's blood was found on the floor. But after a lot of pressure from Holly's family, police finally mobilized people and began to search for the missing 20-year-old.
What we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and divide up into groups.
Time is of the essence. Every hour that passes is crucial. Any tip could be the key.
Y'all go ahead and spread out.
That's why authorities are turning to the public in the disappearance of Holly Bobo, a beautiful 20-year-old nursing student who hasn't been seen in a week. Just before 8 o'clock last Wednesday morning, Holly's 25-year-old brother Clint told police he watched from inside the family home as a man in camouflage led Holly into the woods. At first, Clint thought she was going off with a friend, but when he went outside, he found blood in the driveway and immediately called 911. The police went into high gear, searching for the man in camouflage.
We feel that she knew that she was in fear of her life, so she was complying with his command.
The family begged for help.
Holly, I love you so much. Please try to get home to us. And if anybody knows anything about her, please help us find her.
The entire community rallied together to help find Holly, with law enforcement using all available resources, including helicopters and search dogs to help speed up the search. Holly's family members, including her cousin Whitney Duncan, appeared on TV begging for the public's help in finding Holly.
The last phone call you ever expect to get, and it's a close family, so we're just trying to hold it together.
A reward of $85,000 was offered to anyone with information that would help bring the college student home. Days went by without any sign of where Holly could have been taken. But then, several of her belongings started popping up at various places around town, including her lunchbox, a receipt with her name on it, a card from school, and the SIM card that had been removed from her phone. Early in the investigation, authorities suspected that the person who took Holly was someone known to her, and their suspicion immediately fell on her brother, Clint. Maybe he made up the story about his sister being taken by a man in camouflage to cover up that he was actually the one who hurt her. To eliminate their doubts, they went through his phone and computer and made him take a polygraph test. Eventually, he was cleared of any involvement in his sister's disappearance. Then, investigators started looking at the registered predators in the area to see if any of them fit the description of the man that Clint saw that morning. And one did. His name was Terry Britt. and he actually had a history of targeting young, blue-eyed, blonde women just like Holly. His home was also located in the direction where Holly's phone last pinged. When the police went to question him, he immediately got defensive, saying that he had not hurt anyone. He claimed that he was buying a bathtub at the salvage yard with his wife on the morning that Holly was taken. Although he produced a handwritten receipt for the bathtub, the store had no record of the sale. Investigators wiretapped his house, hoping that he would say something incriminating, but he never did. However, while he was being questioned, he made a pretty disturbing statement about Holly's kidnapping.
She's young, pretty, perfect, somewhat body.
Yeah.
Okay, like a toy, some people would think. See, this man, when he goes and gets this female, then he's gonna go snatch her up. He can't wait to get her to wherever he's gonna take her to, because he's wanting that body. But here comes reality. Now I've got a body. What am I gonna do with it? Because if you keep it, you gotta feed it.
Right.
You gotta hide it. It ain't gonna happen. And if you kill it, what you gonna do with it? I mean, there's no way.
But despite this sick statement, he maintained his innocence. And because investigators didn't have any evidence linking him to Holly, they had to let him go. Meanwhile, weeks had turned into months without any leads as to where Holly could be. And people were beginning to imagine the worst. But Holly's family was still holding on to hope that she could be alive.
When Holly was at home, she'd be asleep, her hand would be kind of folded like this, and I would just slip my hand in her hand for just a few seconds. And I remember doing that after, trying to feel her, thinking if I could just feel her hand in my hand.
3 years went by without any significant progress on the case. But then in March 2014, police got a major breakthrough, and that led to the arrest of 6 men. The first to be arrested were Zach Adams, a local junkie, his brother Dylan, and their friend, Jason Autry. The investigation began with the arrest of Zach's brother Dylan on unrelated weapons charges. And during the arrest, he made a disturbing confession about Holly's disappearance. He told detectives that he had gone to his brother's house that morning to pick up his truck. But when he entered the house, he saw Holly sitting in a green chair in the living room, wearing a pink t-shirt with Jason standing over her. He noted that she was not in good shape and appeared to have been assaulted. He said that his brother had even admitted to doing vile things to Holly and videotaping it. This video, however, was never found, even after the police searched Zach's property. Dylan also claimed that Zach had been wearing camouflage that day, which matched Clint's story. Dylan later recanted the confession, alleging that he was coerced into giving false information, and many people actually believed him because the details did not match the known evidence. Still, this confession led to the arrest of Zach, Dylan, Jason, and another man named Shane Austin. Then, on September 7th, 2014, a local man made a grim discovery while hunting for ginseng in the woods near I-40. He had seen a large bucket in the woods, and when he moved closer to investigate, he stumbled upon a human skull. There was a bullet hole piercing through the back of it on the right, with the trajectory going left. Tragically, the remains were confirmed to be Holly's. Alongside her remains, there were personal items, including a purse, lipstick, pen, and her inhaler.
I just want to say to the Bobos that I'm sorry for the loss. That all got shattered because of these men.
First on Fox, breaking news right now in a local missing persons case, which is being followed in Tennessee and all across the nation tonight. A man is charged with the kidnapping and murder of Holly Bobo almost 3 years after the 20-year-old from Decatur County disappeared.
Now tonight, Fox 17 has team coverage as Zachary Adams, the suspect. He is now in the Chester County Jail, indicted in this case. The question at this point, how law enforcement linked him to Holly Bobo's disappearance and murder.
Zach, Dylan, and Jason were now charged with aggravated kidnapping, first-degree murder, and rape. A couple of other men, Jeffrey and Mark Percy, who were Zach and Dylan's cousins, were also arrested for being accessories and tampering with evidence, though the charges against them were later dropped. The detectives offered Shane an immunity deal for his testimony in court, but in February 2015, he took his life in a hotel room. Later, a gun belonging to him was found in a drainage ditch. The 3 remaining men vehemently denied involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Holly. However, in 2017, Jason accepted a deal to testify against Zach in exchange for a reduced prison sentence. He became the state's key witness and testified to a series of events that was drastically different from those in Dylan's confession. He testified that he was not involved in the abduction himself, but that he went to Shane's home to buy illicit substances, and he saw Shane, Dylan, and Zach disposing of evidence in a burn barrel. Zach also had a body in the back of his truck wrapped in a multicolored blanket.
I pulled into the driveway. I got out. The first thing I noticed was a burn barrel that was burning. The second thing was Dylan was standing in the doorway with his shirt off. Shane was walking around saying, "Y'all need to hurry up and get the goddamn hell out of here." And holstered on his side was a firearm.
He said that Zach then asked him if he could help get rid of Holly's body, and he agreed to do it in exchange for narcotics.
He asked me would I help him bury the body, and I said yeah. As we got going down the road, I brought it to his attention that there were no shovels or pickaxes in the truck. How are we going to bury a body with no shovels or pickaxes? He looks at me and like he's lost. And I said, I don't know of nowhere a man can just pull up and get a shovels and pickaxes, a dead body in the vehicle. I told him that some years back that I had been underneath Interstate 40 bridge and there was a body floating. And I told him, I said, the only thing holding the body up was the intestines.
They drove to a spot along the Tennessee River with plans of gutting her body so that it would not float in the water.
What was your plan of disposing of Holly's body?
Was to gut her, put her in the deep end of the slough. I told him, I said, you put her in the deep end of that slough, turtles and shit to eat it up, just like that.
After unloading the body from the bed of the truck, they realized that Holly was still alive, and they decided to finish her off completely.
And over the top of them, with my hands upon my knees, she being right here. And at that time, I see the foot move, a movement, and a sound of distress that sound like, come out of her voice, come from the blanket. At that time, I walked to the door, to the passenger side door of the pickup, and Mr. Adams was digging in a fanny pack. I told him, I said, this fucking bitch is still alive. We just stopped for a second. I walked to the front of the truck. And I told Zach, I said, she's heard my name called and heard me talking and all. At that time, he wheels around, walks back to the driver's side pickup. Out of the floorboard of the pickup, he pulls a pistol, the same pistol that was holstered on Mr. Austin's side at 30 Yellow Springs Road. I looked around and I told him that there was nothing coming close as clear, something to that effect. And at that time, boom, the gun sounded, the gun went off. And it sounded like to me that it shot 3 or 4 times underneath that bridge. I had done made it back. I had done started my way back this way. And it sounded like boom, boom, boom underneath that bridge. It was just one shot, but it echoed underneath that bridge all the way down that damn river bottom.
Fearing that the noise of the gunfire might have attracted attention, Zach and Jason loaded the body back into the truck, and Zach dropped Jason off. Jason testified that Zach later told him that he had dumped the body near a place called Kelly Ridge, which is a different location from where Holly's body was found. Jason then said something interesting about how Zach, Dylan, and Shane were able to kidnap Holly from her home in the first place.
What did Zach, or how did Zach respond?
He said the real reason that we were there was to show Clint how to manufacture meth. He said we got there early. She come outside screaming and raising hell, and we took her.
Zach's defense attempted to discredit Jason by pointing out that he had motive to lie in exchange for a reduced sentence. They alleged that although some of his stories seemed to be corroborated, he had access to all the details through discovery. The defense also pointed to the fact that Zach's cell phone pings did not follow the path that Holly's cell phone took, and that none of the accused men matched the witness description given by Clint. The Adams brothers and Jason were all too tall and were either too slim or too heavy to be the abductor. While Shane was the correct weight and height, Clint described a man with dark hair that covered his neck. Shane had short red hair.
The man that I saw I would describe as about 5'10", 5'11" in height and about 200 pounds in weight.
Would you agree with me that that is not the same physical size or stature of Zach Adams?
I would.
That is not correct.
That is not.
A former TBI agent, Terry Dickus, who had been the lead investigator on the case, testified for the defense. He told the jury that he ruled the men out early in the case because Shane passed a polygraph, their alibis checked out, and cell phone records put Zach and Holly several miles apart during the critical time frame. He also admitted that the investigation was not handled correctly.
The left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. We were feeding all of this information in, and we didn't realize what was there. Their alibis or their stories were not checked out.
Checked out. Was it a mistake?
Yes, it was a mistake.
The defense argued that the investigators were so desperate to close the case that they unfairly targeted her client.
The most expensive and most exhaustive investigation in the history of the state of Tennessee. And yet, when they came to 2013, they had nothing.
Zach's defense alleged that the initial suspect in the case, Terry Britt, was the real killer, saying that he has never been cleared by investigators and that the government had more evidence of his guilt than it does of these three defendants. Reportedly, Clint had even identified a voice sample of Terry's voice as being similar to the voice he heard that morning. However, several other witnesses testified that Zach made statements implicating himself in Holly's kidnapping and murder.
You know, I was there for the worst of it. And I was like, well, did you do it? And he was like, I was there for the worst of it. And he just left it like that.
Did he tell you what had happened to her body?
Yes, Mom, he did. He told me that the bottom side was found in one part of Tennessee, and then some other pieces was found otherwhere.
Did he say what had happened to her body before that?
It had got chopped up.
Zach's ex-girlfriend also testified that he had once threatened to tie her up and do to her what he had done to Holly.
Said he would tie me up just like he did Holly Bobo and nobody would ever see me again.
Zach had also allegedly threatened his brother after his arrest that he would put him in a hole beside her if he didn't keep his mouth shut. Meanwhile, Holly's family was still struggling to keep it together through the trial, but at some point, it was just too much for Karen that she passed out on the stand after seeing Holly's belongings.
Holly have an inhaler?
Yes, you did. Take just a minute, I'm feeling sick.
Let's take a recess. I want everyone to remain with me while the jury files out, please.
On September 22nd, 2017, a jury found Zach guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. His brother Dylan pleaded guilty to the charges of facilitation of first-degree murder and especially aggravated kidnapping. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison.
finally, after 6.5 years, I do feel that we got justice for our daughter. We have lived a hard life and walked on an extremely unimaginable hard road for 6.5 years. So I did consider that in our decision for the future, in hopes that maybe we can start to rebuild what life we have left. And if there is any joy to be found in life anymore, that we can start finding it.
After his plea deal, Jason received a reduced sentence of 8 years and was released in 2020. But later, he recanted his testimony, saying that he made up the entire story so he could get out of jail. Following this, he was arrested for an unrelated firearm charge and sentenced to nearly 20 years in prison. In January 2024, Zach filed a petition that his conviction be overturned on the basis of this new evidence. As of June 2024, he's awaiting new trial. What do you think about this case and how the police handled it? Do you think Zach is the killer, or was he just a scapegoat? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button.